Hey Defenders, welcome back. In this video, I want to show you guys how we can use Wazuh to set up a basic web application firewall. Now, this isn't the most robust web application firewall that you can implement. There are some other open source tools for that, such as Mod Security is a great one that you can add to nginx and Apache. But if you don't have, but that is a little more complex of a configuration and setup. So if you only have access to maybe your access logs or error logs from your reverse proxy, then this is a great way you can implement a WAF without having to add any modules or rebuild any services. So stick around and we'll jump into it. Alright, so I have a very basic diagram for you guys here. So I'm currently using nginx. Nginx is a popular reverse proxy that a lot of organizations implement and is free to implement. I think they have a pro version where they offer support if you need it, but the technology and everything is free to install. It's open source. Another popular one is Apache. But in this instance, I've just stood up a nginx reverse proxy, and a very basic intro into what exactly a reverse proxy is and how I'm using it in my demo environment is I host my website, demo.opensecure.co is hosted within one of my environments, and it is externally accessible from the internet. So when a user goes to demo.opensecure.co, they send that traffic to my nginx server. My nginx server then takes that traffic and points it to the correct application, in this case being Kibana's web application. So that's a very basic intro into what a reverse proxy is. So you can basically think of it as this is the server that is receiving the traffic before passing it off to Kibana. And the reason you do this is so that you can handle, user authentication. You can set up a WAF, SSO enablement, deploying SSL certs, right? So there's a number of reasons why you want a reverse proxy stood up in front of your app server. It's a big security no-no, of course, to stand up an application such as Kibana that is accessible from the internet. So a reverse proxy gives you a way to lock that down to where users aren't able to interact with Kibana or whatever web application you have hosted without going through nginx first. So you have that security there. So for example, if from the internet we were able to access Kibana, if I had that hosted externally and there was a vulnerability came up within Kibana that allowed users to circumvent maybe Kibana's authentication that they provide, then that would be vulnerable to anyone to be able to exploit, right? Where if I have nginx or another reverse proxy solution running in front of it, if my Kibana server becomes vulnerable, yes, I still want to get that patch, but it's not as crucial because I have nginx handling the authentication prior to doing so, right? And so that's a very, very high level of kind of reverse proxies. Hopefully a lot of you guys are familiar with that already. And I already have this stood up within my lab environment. So here I'm on my nginx server here. I can, by default, nginx, or you can set up nginx logging. So I can have every request that's made to demo.opensecure.co is logged within an access file. So I'll put var log nginx, and I will look at the nginx access.log, and here we can see a lot of requests are already coming in, right? And so let's see if we can actually trigger these. So let's say I go to demo.opensecure.co. We will see all of my requests starting to come through, and we can see that now, right? So this is my reverse proxy that is handling this and is then passing this request, my request to the Kibana web app, which is responding with my user interface, right? And so we have all these logs, right? And so we see the request, whether it's a GET, a POST, or a PUT, or any other type of HTTP request that can be made. We see the request line that I am attempting to load, right? So for example, if we saw like a SQL injection, so if I did something, and all right, so let's see if we can make another entry here. So if I run this curl command out to demo.opensecure.co/select, select plus, I guess in this total example, this is a very basic demonstration here, but select plus usually represents or is similar to a SQL injection type of attack. But if I go ahead and run this curl command out, we see within the access logs, you see my GET request to /select plus, right? And you can see the server responded with a 302, which is a redirect, right? So we can see all requests that are made into a browser, right? So if I do like a curl / please subscribe, we will also see it come in here as well, right? So all of our requests are being logged within this access log. And so that allows us to see everything that, in terms of request URLs, right? So granted, and that's why I said this isn't a fully robust WAF, but is something that you can implement to definitely increase your security. I still highly suggest exploring a true WAF, such as Mod Security is a great one that's free and comes bundled with, well, it doesn't come bundled with, but can be easily installed with nginx and Apache, and does much more robust analysis of users' requests, HTTP requests, right? So it's where here we're only getting the request line, right? So I'm only seeing the request line of within the URL, right? But something like Mod Security will inspect the request body, parameters that are being passed, cookies that are being passed. So it's much more robust and is a true WAF. Where this, we're just looking at the request line, so we're kind of limited into what we can see, but this will allow you to quickly spin up a kind of scaled back WAF, but definitely gives you some extra protection, which is good. So, all right, so now how do we do that, right? So thankfully, Wazuh decoders and rules already have some nginx analysis in place, right? So again, my entries here are within my var log nginx access.log. Let's go ahead and now forward our access log to Wazuh so we can see some alerts, right? So I'll go ahead and go into my management for groups and go into my config file for this guy, and you can see that I've already added it here, which is good. So you would just need to follow these similar steps. So as we've done in the past, right, when telling Wazuh to monitor or to forward log files that aren't bundled with Wazuh by default, we need to add our local file tags. We have our log format. Although this is nginx, the Apache log format works and works well. And we have a location. You can see my location tag is exactly where the file resides on the nginx server, right? So that's good. And then we just close it with the local file. We save that, and we are now having the Wazuh agent forward our access log, right? Which is good. And so now we can start to see some alerts, and we'll see if we can generate some. By default, Wazuh actually provides rules to look for web attacks, which is really nice, right? So like here's one: attempt to access forbidden file or directory, SQL injection attacks, common web attack, cross-site scripting attacks, a web attack returned a 200 success, so that would be one that could be potentially a high alert, right? So that's looking at the request line, right? So like one of these guys, and then your response code. So if the server responded with a 200 being a success, meaning that the backend server accepted the request, that could be an indicator that someone has successfully ran a web attack and your server accepted it, right? So we have all these already pre-bundled, which is great. So now we need to go into our agent that is. So now we need to go into our nginx agent, and let's see if we can trigger some of these alerts. So I will just replicate our like a SQL injection. I'll just do select again. All right, so that ran. Let's now go into events, and sure enough, here we go. We see the rule has already triggered SQL injection attempt. And let me refresh. SQL injection attempt, and here we now parse it out a little bit, right? So you can see the full log, right? So again, that correlates to exactly what we see here. Correlates exactly to what we see here, right? So that's good. We see the response that was given by the server, so a 302, so that's good. It's just a redirect. We see the data URL, so we see my like request line, right? So within the full log, we see the exact parameters that I ran against that, right? So that's good. And then we see the rule description and some other kind of metadata around it, right? So that's good, and that's really easy, right? So 9 times out of 10, if you guys within y'all's organization, there's maybe a separate team that handles reverse proxies, they're probably already outputting to an access log. And what you can do is just stand up a Wazuh agent on that guy and point the Wazuh agent to this log file to forward it to your manager, and then you can start getting, logging all web requests, which is great. So you can now start to see, hey, is someone starting to do a SQL injection attempt, right? Which is what we just replicated here. And now you can be alerted on that, and especially if you're seeing, multiple. And so here we see the source IP that's triggering the alert. And so if you saw, a Chinese IP address or something, an IP address allocated to China in this example, and for this example, and it's generating a lot of SQL injection attempts, common web attack attempts. And so now we're starting to log those, right? Which is great. Now what if, so we're logging, so that could be like a WAF in a detection mode, but what if I want to start blocking IP addresses that are generating a lot of these web attack alerts, right? So we can take advantage of active response to do so. So let me go into my management, my configuration, and I'll scroll down to my active response section, and here we go here, and I will paste a new block in here, and let's go ahead and walk through that. So if you haven't seen my active response video, I'll link it right now. It'll be up in the top right of the video, so check that out first if you're a little confused. But we can use this to generate a IP tables rule that will deny any traffic from an IP address that is generating web attacks, right? So we have our command firewall drop, our location, I will set this to all, so it would be any agent that is currently online would run this. My rules group I have set to attack. A good way to see what groups you could use, so in this example, SQL injection attempt, these are the rule groups that it's associated with. So if you just want to defend against SQL injections, or I like to use attack. The attack is kind of broad. Again, you want to be really careful with active response and kind of do some testing. And if you haven't seen my active response video, I'll link it right now. It'll be up in the top right of the video, so check that out first if you're a little confused. So and do some validation beforehand to make sure you don't start to block legitimate traffic. But in this case, I'm using the attack group because that will correlate to all web attacks as well. So I don't have to list the rule IDs one at a time. I can just say any ID that is associated with the rule group attack, I want to trigger the active response for. I'll have a timeout of 700 seconds. So after the 700 seconds, the IP tables rule that denies traffic from the source IP that generated the alert will be stopped, will be removed. And then my repeat offenders, so if someone does it within 30 minutes, 60 minutes, or 120, their timeout just continues to increase. Right. All right, so let's save that and restart, and let's see if I can lock myself out here. And it should be just pretty basic. I'll run the same command here. Sorry, let me turn off this notification of these chats. Apologies for that. All right, sorry about that, but that gave us time to restart the manager. So now let's go ahead and refresh this guy, and okay, that all looks good. All right, so let's see if we can generate a SQL injection attack again. And let me actually do it from my local host so that I don't block myself from the Wazuh manager side. So let me do that. So I'll just run select plus. And all right, so that should have now triggered an alert. So we see the SQL injection attempt. Okay, good. And we should see now the active response. We should see mine being dropped. Oh, wait, but maybe. Aha, that's why. Okay, so let me remove this whitelist real quick. So you can also include whitelists of IP address that you don't want to trigger active response. So maybe these are like trusted customers or your own internal devices, right? You can whitelist these so that just another step of precaution to where, hey, these won't accidentally trigger active response, which would block this guy out, right? So I had added that, so I need to remove that because that was not triggering the active response like I'm wanting it to. All right, so I've saved and restarted that. So now let's try this again. And let me be tailing this. And if I, just replicate again, another just kind of simple SQL injection. Boom, we see my IP address was just added. So that looks good. And if I refresh, we should see that, yep, host blocked by firewall drop. So good. So we can see, and this happened just milliseconds after, right? If we look at the timestamps here. So I triggered the SQL injection attempt at 39.57.331, and my IP address was added to the firewall drop at 339. So now, if I try to run the same curl, you see it's just spinning here, right? Because I am navigating through nginx, and I'm saying, hey, I'm making this request, but nginx is saying, no, I'm denying your traffic because I saw that you triggered a SQL injection attempt, right? And so that's great. This also applies to cross-site scripting attempts, common web attacks such as like directory traversals, things of that nature, and is something that's pretty easy and simple to implement. Granted, word of caution, please do testing as best as you can to where you're not blocking legitimate traffic. And so if you already have a reverse proxy stood up, such as like nginx or Apache, but you don't have, for example, mod security enabled on it, and you're looking to implement some type of web application security, granted, like I said, this isn't the most robust thing. There are better tools out there, and mod security is something we will look at in the future. But this is something that you can quickly implement because, again, 9 times out of 10, whoever is in charge of maintaining and running your reverse proxy for your organization is probably dumping out to an access log of some sort. And we can easily take that access log. We're not having to make any tweaks on the reverse proxy server itself. All we're doing is installing an agent and pointing to the log file. We can then implement some active response capabilities to give us that protection when it becomes obvious that someone is running some web app attacks against us. And is a nice little feature we can use to better protect our environment and our applications. So I appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Apologies for the delay in video. I've been on holiday and work has been crazy, so I'm trying to get on a more set schedule. So apologies for that. But hopefully I will have some free time here the rest of the week and the weeks coming up to pump out some more videos. So I truly do appreciate you guys, and I will see you in the next one.